Did you ever notice that Anastasia and Drizella don't look like they're related? Like, at all? Same mom, supposedly the same root, completely different faces. Well, maybe except for that nose. They kind of share the same nose. But different personalities, love interests, and moral compasses. And when you take a closer look at their gestures, expressions, and even their story arcs, it all reveals something unexpected. These two don't truly behave like full sisters at all. And this observation has led to a series of intriguing theories that explain these big differences between the two sisters. Some shocking, some convincing, and some downright scandalous. Of all the theories surrounding the Tremaine sisters, this one might be the most provocative. At first glance, the idea sounds wild, but when you layer the evidence, it starts to make unsettling sense. Anastasia's father may not have been the same man as Drizella's. Let's start with what we can observe. Drizella and Lady Tremaine look, move, and act almost identically. Their faces share sharp, angular features, and their posture is upright and rigid. Even their mannerisms, pursed lips, calculating eyes, dismissive smirks, are near copies. Drizella is visually and emotionally the product of a cold, status-obsessed lineage. Anastasia, on the other hand, breaks that pattern entirely. Her design features softer edges. Her expressions are hesitant, her gestures less practiced. Even her color palette leans warmer, rose tones instead of the muted greens and purples of her mother and sister. Anastasia's entire look tells us that she doesn't belong in this family of severity. Behaviorally, too, the contrast runs even deeper. Drizella mimics Lady Tremaine's every trait. Ambition, envy, emotional repression. She craves approval, not affection. Anastasia, meanwhile, operates from emotion rather than strategy. She feels guilt. She expresses vulnerability and seeks love. Qualities completely alien in the Tremaine household. So where does that difference come from? Here's where the theory clicks. Lady Tremaine's first husband, Drizella's father, was likely a man of status and wealth, someone who shared her obsession with reputation. But between his death and her eventual marriage to Cinderella's father, she may have briefly been involved with a kind, artistic man, perhaps a musician or a painter, or even a tutor within the royal court. Logically, this makes sense too. Drizella is canonically the older sibling, which supports the timeline of Lady Tremaine's first marriage and explains how Anastasia could have come later, fathered by someone else. If Anastasia was the child of that relationship, I can see how all the puzzle pieces begin to align. To me, her warmth, gentleness, and emotional intelligence feel like reflections of a softer part of Lady Tremaine, a side that once knew kindness before it calcified into bitterness. And from a storytelling perspective, this theory resonates deeply in Cinderella 3: A Twist in Time, where Anastasia's choice of love and truth over deceit doesn't feel like redemption. It feels like her reclaiming the empathy and humanity that were always inside her, the very traits that set her apart from the rest of her family. And honestly, this theory isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. It neatly explains the vast differences between the two sisters in appearance, personality, and emotional capacity. Historically, it's also very possible that Lady Tremaine, left widowed and financially uncertain, could have fallen pregnant by another man before remarrying. A brief and discreet relationship with a court artist or musician would have been scandalous but believable for a woman of her social position, and perhaps something she'd go to great lengths to conceal. But let's back up for a second. Let's say that Anastasia and Drizella actually did share the same biological father. Even then, the emotional gap between them still begs to be explained, which actually brings us to the second theory, one less genetic and more psychological. Lady Tremaine, as we know, was obsessed with status. Her entire identity revolved around maintaining appearances and securing wealth through marriage. She raised her daughters not as children, but as extensions of her social ambitions. However, even the most controlling parent can't control everything equally. In a household driven by hierarchy, one child usually becomes the quote-unquote project, and the other, the afterthought. Under this theory, Drizella was the heir, the one Tremaine chose to shape in her image. She was the chosen successor, you could say, the one expected to uphold the family's dignity, charm, and reputation. That means endless scrutiny, posture lessons, etiquette correction, emotional repression. In contrast, Anastasia was left unrefined. Less pressure, less expectation, more space to exist in her own emotional world. That gap created what psychologists might call selective conditioning. Drizella was conditioned for performance, Anastasia for invisibility. And ironically, invisibility preserved Anastasia's emotional flexibility. When you aren't constantly under pressure to please, you develop inner resources, imagination, curiosity, even empathy. That's why Anastasia, years later, could recognize love when it finally appeared, in the form of a humble baker. The way I like to think about this is Her capacity to love wasn't taught, it survived. Drizella, however, had no such room for softness. She was too busy performing, too busy proving she could be as ruthless and as elegant as her mother. This also explains why Drizella's cruelty feels exaggerated. It's performative. She mocks, she bullies, and ridicules, not because she believes in cruelty's worth, but because it's what earns her approval. In other words, it's imitation of power, not power itself. And this last and final theory was actually inspired by one of you. So a big shout out to YellowBear-KX1FF for inspiring and commenting this idea. And also happy belated 30th birthday, fellow Disney fan. Thanks for being part of the family for so long. But this next theory actually spins off from the second one. While the idea of selective grooming explained how Lady Tremaine favored Drizella as her project, this version adds another emotional layer. It suggests that Anastasia was favored by her father, while Drizella was her mother's chosen child. When their father was still alive, Anastasia may have been closer to him. Perhaps he encouraged her softer nature, or nurtured her creativity in small, quiet ways. We can imagine him teaching her to play the piano, complimenting her singing, or simply being patient when her clumsy kindness resurfaced. That attention could have planted the seed of her empathy and her imagination. Drizella, meanwhile, mirrored her mother from a very young age. She absorbed Tremaine's tone, her posture, and even her disdain for anything that seemed weak or sentimental. The evidence is clear in their appearances and behaviors. Drizella's sharp brows and upright posture mimic her mother's severity, while Anastasia's rounded features, her softer movements, and hesitant voice reveal a completely different energy, one shaped by affection rather than ambition. This distinction between the parents' influences also explains why the sisters grew apart so drastically. Anastasia carried forward her father's warmth and curiosity, while Drizella embodied her mother's ambition and control. When Lady Tremaine lost her husband, she doubled down on shaping Drizella into her mirror, and in doing so, she alienated the last piece of her softness left in the house. They were fundamentally different in both nature and nurture. Physically speaking, Drizella took after her mother, inheriting Lady Tremaine's sharp cheekbones, fancy hair updo, piercing gaze, and commanding posture, along with her cold and status-driven personality. Anastasia, on the other hand, likely took after her father in both looks and temperament. Her rounded features, her warmer coloring, and her softer voice suggest a gentler parental influence, one rooted in kindness and sensitivity. Regardless of whether she and Drizella share the same father, Anastasia clearly embodied the emotional openness and warmth that her mother's side of the family lacked entirely. If we accept the idea that the sisters may not share the same father, those differences become even more pronounced. Anastasia's warmth, kindness, and emotional depth could stem from a gentler paternal influence, perhaps the rumored artist or court musician. But even if we set that aside, their behavior still reflects two opposing parental legacies. Anastasia, her father's daughter, guided by creativity and empathy. Drizella, her mother's mirror, driven by ambition and control. Together, these theories also explain why Anastasia and Drizella appear so different both physically and emotionally. Their contrasting features mirror the emotional divide between them. The differences we see on their faces are the same differences we feel in their personality, one born of tenderness and growth, the other of imitation and fear. And ultimately, whether these distinctions stem from different fathers or simply different parental influences, the result is the same. Two sisters who embody the battle between nurture and self-awareness. Anastasia's growth proves that compassion can survive even in the harshest environments, while Drizella's downfall shows what happens when imitation replaces individuality. It's a quiet reminder that redemption isn't luck or magic. It's a result of self-awareness, courage, and the willingness to become something more than what you were taught to be. But as always, I want to know what you think. Do you believe Anastasia and Drizella had different fathers? Or do you think the difference was purely emotional? And more importantly, if Drizella ever had the same chance as Anastasia, do you think she could have changed too? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below.